Randy Rhoads wasn't just a guitarist, he was a phenomenon. At barely 25 years old, he had already transformed the world of rock music with a style that was both fierce and elegant, fusing classical influences with heavy metal in ways no one had ever heard before. As Ozzy Osbourne's lead guitarist, Rhoads seemed destined for a lifetime of glory, his name written alongside the greats of Hendrix and Page. But on March 19, 1982, his life ended in a fiery plane crash that stunned the world. For decades, fans and journalists have asked the same haunting question: what really happened that day? Official reports called it an accident, a reckless stunt gone wrong. But conflicting accounts, unanswered questions, and strange details have fueled conspiracy theories ever since. Why was the plane in the air in the first place? Why did the pilot, a man with a troubling past, take such risks? And why do those who were there describe events that don't quite add up? Now, with the passage of time and new testimonies emerging, the truth behind Randy Rhoads' death is finally coming into focus. But it isn't the story fans hoped for. It isn't heroic. It isn't glamorous. It's a tale of recklessness, misjudgment, and the cruel way fate can cut short genius in an instant. Today, we revisit the tragedy of Randy Rhoads, exploring the events of that fateful day, the investigations that followed, and the revelations that have left fans heartbroken even decades later. The mystery may finally be solved, but the Randy Rhoads story begins far from the chaos of heavy metal tours and screaming arenas. Born in Santa Monica, California in 1956, Randy grew up in a modest household filled with music. His mother, Dolores, was a music teacher who ran her own school, and it was there that Randy's first love for the guitar was nurtured. Unlike many rock stars who stumbled into music through rebellion, Randy was a student first, someone who respected theory, structure, and discipline. This foundation would become the secret weapon that made him stand out in the hard rock world. By his teenage years, Randy had already begun blending the discipline of classical music with the fire of rock guitar. His early band, Quiet Riot, gave him a platform to showcase his technical ability, but it was clear he was destined for more. When Ozzy Osbourne auditioned him in 1979, Randy's fate changed forever. Ozzy, fresh from his split with Black Sabbath, was searching for a guitarist who could not only revive his career, but also help him redefine himself. In Randy, he found exactly that. From the very first rehearsal, Randy's style stunned Ozzy. His use of classical scales, arpeggios, and rapid-fire runs wasn't just flashy, it was revolutionary. Together, they created a new sound for heavy metal. Albums like Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman weren't just hits. They were game changers. Songs like Crazy Train showcased riffs that became anthems, while Randy's solos elevated the guitar to an art form. Critics, fans, and fellow musicians quickly realized they were witnessing something rare. A guitarist who wasn't just talented, but transformative. What made Randy different was his humility. Despite his rapid rise to fame, he remained soft-spoken and intensely dedicated to his craft. He often carried a classical guitar with him on tour buses, practicing scales and experimenting with new techniques. He had ambitions that went beyond rock stardom. He wanted to study classical guitar full-time, perhaps even leave the world of heavy metal behind someday. That dream, tragically, would never be realized. By 1982, Randy was not just Ozzy's guitarist. He was his right hand, the anchor that gave Ozzy's new band credibility and artistry. Fans followed them from city to city, hungry for the electrifying performances that seemed to grow more powerful with each show. Behind the scenes, Randy often acted as a stabilizing force, keeping Ozzy focused at a time when his life was spiraling under the weight of addiction and chaos. It's this dual image, the blazing guitarist on stage and the quiet, disciplined student off stage, that made Randy such a compelling figure. He was proof that rock could be more than noise and rebellion. It could be intelligent, structured, even beautiful. For young musicians around the world, he was a beacon of inspiration. And then came March 19, 1982. At just 25 years old, Randy Rhoads' extraordinary journey came to an end. But the way it ended, in a small plane crash on a tour stop in Leesburg, Florida, was so shocking, so senseless, that it left fans and fellow musicians struggling to understand. How could such discipline, such genius, such promise be destroyed in such a reckless and avoidable way? The mystery of that crash, and the questions surrounding it, would soon overshadow the brilliance of his career. And it is here, at the intersection of genius and tragedy, that the story of Randy Rhoads takes its darkest turn. The answer isn't good. March 19th, 1982, started like any other day on tour for Ozzy Osbourne's band. They were traveling between shows in Florida, exhausted but pushing forward. The group had stopped in Leesburg, a small town with a private airstrip near a property owned by a bus company where they could rest and do some quick maintenance. What should have been an uneventful stop became the setting for one of the darkest tragedies in rock history. The tour bus had pulled up to the property of Jerry Calhoun, the owner of both the bus company and a small collection of planes. Parked nearby was a Beechcraft F-35, a small aircraft that would become the instrument of disaster. The plane was piloted by Andrew Aycock, the band's tour bus driver, a man who, though licensed, was not in top flying form. Aycock had a checkered past, including a revoked license and a history of reckless behavior. Still, in that moment, no one seemed concerned. After all, it was just supposed to be a joyride. Randy, along with hairdresser Rachel Youngblood, climbed aboard the plane with Aycock. The idea reportedly was innocent at first, a short flight to blow off steam. But according to witnesses, Aycock had something more dangerous in mind. Multiple reports suggest that he had argued with his estranged wife the night before, and she happened to be traveling with the band. In a bizarre twist of fate, she was on the tour bus that day. Aycock, perhaps attempting to show off or intimidate, began buzzing the bus with the small plane, flying dangerously low in repeated passes. On the ground, band members, including Ozzy himself, watched in horror. At first, it may have looked like a reckless stunt, but as the plane continued to dive closer to the bus, the danger became unmistakable. On the third pass, tragedy struck. One of the plane's wings clipped the bus, sending the aircraft spiraling out of control. Within seconds, it crashed into a nearby garage, erupting into flames. All three on board, Randy, Rachel, and Aycock, were killed instantly. The aftermath was pure chaos. Ozzy and the rest of the crew rushed from the bus, but the crash site was already consumed by fire. Ozzy later recalled in interviews that he had to be physically restrained as he tried to pull Randy's body from the wreckage. The grief and disbelief were overwhelming. Only moments earlier, Randy had been joking with the band, full of life and energy. Now, at just 25 years old, his brilliance was gone. For many, the circumstances were almost too bizarre to accept. Why had Randy agreed to board that plane? Friends described him as cautious, even reserved when it came to taking risks. Unlike many rock stars of the era, Randy didn't indulge in reckless living. He rarely drank, avoided drugs, and was focused almost obsessively on his craft. It seemed wildly out of character for him to participate in what amounted to a reckless stunt. Some speculated that he boarded simply to get some fresh air, or to take a short ride to escape the stress of touring. Others believed he had no idea Aycock would attempt something so dangerous. The investigation that followed raised more questions than it answered. Toxicology reports revealed that Aycock had cocaine in his system at the time of the crash, suggesting his judgment was severely impaired. The plane itself was in questionable condition, with maintenance records that were incomplete at best. In the official report, the crash was attributed to poor judgment and recklessness on the part of the pilot. But for fans and fellow musicians, that explanation felt hollow. The sheer senselessness of it all only deepened the mystery. How could one of the greatest guitarists of his generation, a man who had so much ahead of him, die in such a careless accident? Was it really just bad luck? Or was there something more to the story? Something that had been overlooked or perhaps even covered up? In the decades that followed, rumors swirled. Some whispered that the crash wasn't an accident at all, but a deliberate act of revenge or rage. Others insisted that Randy never would have willingly agreed to the flight had he known what Aycock intended. What is certain is that the official record left too many questions unanswered, and the mystery of Randy Rhoads' death continued to haunt fans for years. But in recent years, new details have come to light. Accounts from witnesses, overlooked evidence, and reevaluations of the crash have begun to paint a clearer and more disturbing picture of what really happened that day. And the truth, when pieced together, isn't good. The death of Randy Rhoads didn't just devastate Ozzy Osbourne's band, it shook the entire world of rock music. For Ozzy personally, the loss was catastrophic. He wasn't just losing a bandmate, he was losing a lifeline. At that time, Ozzy was struggling with addiction and self-destruction. But Randy had been his anchor, the one who kept rehearsals disciplined, the one who pushed the music forward when chaos threatened to derail it all. In later interviews, Ozzy admitted that losing Randy nearly destroyed him. He confessed he considered quitting music altogether, unable to imagine continuing without the young guitarist who had given him new life after his split with Black Sabbath. For Sharon Arden, soon to be Sharon Osbourne, the tragedy was equally devastating. She was not only managing Ozzy's career, but also trying to protect him from himself. Randy had been a stabilizing force, and now he was gone. In the days following the crash, Sharon reportedly worked tirelessly to keep Ozzy moving, organizing memorials, canceling shows, and handling the media storm. But privately, Ozzy spiraled deeper, haunted by guilt and sorrow. He later revealed that he often dreamed of Randy, conversations that felt so vivid he would wake in tears. Beyond the immediate circle, the guitar community was stunned. Randy wasn't just another shredder in a crowded scene. He was redefining what was possible. Eddie Van Halen, who had himself been hailed as the guitar hero of the era, openly praised Randy's innovation. Younger guitarists studied his every lick, trying to emulate the blend of precision and emotion that had become his trademark. To lose such a rare talent so early left fans with a sense of unfinished business, a haunting what-if that has never gone away. But it wasn't just grief that lingered. Almost immediately, rumors began to spread. The official explanation, that it was a reckless stunt gone wrong, fueled by a pilot under the influence, made sense on paper. But many felt it didn't add up. Randy wasn't a daredevil, and he certainly wasn't known for taking unnecessary risks. Why would he, of all people, climb into a plane with a volatile man like Andrew Aycock at the controls? Some claimed Randy didn't even want to go, that he was coaxed or pressured into the flight. Others pointed to Aycock's troubled history. His license had once been revoked, and his drug use was well documented. More disturbingly, there were whispers that his erratic flying that day wasn't just for thrills, but an act of rage. His estranged wife, as fate would have it, was on the tour bus that he was buzzing. Did Aycock deliberately try to scare her? Was the crash not just reckless, but intentional? The fact that the plane struck the bus before going down gave fuel to those dark suspicions. The garage it struck, destroying not only the plane but 3 lives, became a symbol of unanswered questions. Witness accounts varied. Some said the plane appeared to be attempting a landing. Others insisted it was clearly aiming dangerously close to the bus in repeated passes. Investigators concluded pilot error and cocaine intoxication were the main causes. But for fans, the idea of pilot error felt like too neat an answer. The mystery deepened because Randy was so different from the stereotypical rock casualty. He wasn't addicted, he wasn't reckless, and he wasn't self-destructive. He was a disciplined musician who cared deeply about his future. That contradiction, the careful, thoughtful guitarist dying in such a careless accident, fueled endless speculation. Magazines of the time ran sensational headlines. Some painted the crash as a cruel twist of fate, others hinted at darker motives. In fan circles, conspiracy theories flourished. Was Aycock trying to kill his wife? Was Randy even aware of the danger? Could something mechanical have gone wrong with the plane? No matter what angle people took, they all circled back to the same haunting truth. The official story never felt complete. For Ozzy, the conspiracy theories only compounded his grief. He admitted he replayed the events in his mind constantly, wondering if there was something he could have done differently. He said that Randy had confided in him just weeks earlier about wanting to leave touring life behind and pursue classical guitar. That knowledge made the tragedy sting even more. Randy had been preparing for the next chapter of his life, a chapter that would never come. The weight of unanswered questions made Randy Rhoads' death more than just another tragic rock story. It became a mystery, one that fans, journalists, and musicians would continue to revisit for decades. And in recent years, new perspectives and overlooked evidence have begun to clarify what really happened. Cutting through the myths, the truth, however, is far from comforting. For decades, the death of Randy Rhoads lived in a fog of speculation. Fans clung to theories, investigators closed their files, and Ozzy Osbourne carried the grief like a scar he could never heal. But over time, new interviews, witness accounts, and a closer look at the details have peeled back the mystery. What has emerged isn't a hidden conspiracy or a dramatic cover-up. The truth is, in some ways, even worse, Randy's death was the result of pure negligence, selfishness, and the reckless choices of one man who never should have been behind the controls of that plane. The official NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board, report made it clear that Andrew Aycock, the tour bus driver turned pilot, had no business flying that day. His license had been revoked years earlier for serious violations. He had a history of erratic behavior, substance abuse, and poor judgment. Toxicology reports confirmed he had cocaine in his system at the time of the crash. In short, he was unfit to be flying any plane, let alone with passengers. What's most heartbreaking is that Randy himself almost certainly didn't realize the full danger he was walking into. Friends and bandmates recalled that Randy was cautious by nature, and he wasn't looking for a thrill. He reportedly boarded the plane only because he wanted a quick ride to clear his head. What he didn't know was that Aycock was not just flying recklessly, he was in the middle of a personal meltdown. His estranged wife, who was traveling with the band, was sitting on the tour bus at the time. Witnesses believe Aycock was deliberately buzzing the bus to scare her, using the plane as a weapon in his emotional spiral. If that's true, it means Randy and Rachel Youngblood were never even the intended targets. They were victims of someone else's anger, dragged into a private drama that should never have involved them. It reframes the crash not as an accident, but as a reckless act of rage that went fatally wrong. The fact that Aycock's actions ended 3 lives in seconds makes the tragedy feel even more senseless, and in many ways, unforgivable. What's worse, the plane itself wasn't in proper condition to be flying. Maintenance logs were incomplete, and experts later suggested the aircraft was barely airworthy. Combine that with a pilot high on cocaine, emotionally unstable, and attempting dangerous stunts, and disaster was almost guaranteed. Randy, who had so much discipline in his own life, stepped into a situation where discipline was absent at every level. And he paid the ultimate price. Over the years, as more people connected to the band and the investigation spoke out, the pieces fell into place. It wasn't sabotage, it wasn't fate, and it wasn't some unexplainable mystery. It was preventable, and that's what makes it so devastating. Randy's death wasn't the result of a risk he willingly took. It was the result of someone else's recklessness. For Ozzy Osbourne, that knowledge has been both a bitter truth and a lifelong wound. He has said in countless interviews that he still dreams of Randy, still hears his guitar in his head. He admits that Randy's loss was the single hardest blow of his life, one he has never fully recovered from. Fans agree. Every time Crazy Train plays or a young guitarist studies Randy's solos, there's the haunting reminder of how much more he could have given the world. Randy's legacy is secure. He is remembered as one of the greatest guitarists of all time, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame posthumously, and celebrated by generations of musicians. But the way he died remains a cautionary tale. It wasn't drugs, it wasn't the rock and roll lifestyle, and it wasn't fate. It was negligence, impulsiveness, and selfishness, and that's why the truth isn't good. The mystery is solved, but it offers no comfort. If anything, it makes the loss feel heavier, because Randy Rhoads didn't have to die that day. His future was stolen, not by the chaos of rock and roll, but by the recklessness of someone who made a series of catastrophic choices. That's the real tragedy. And that's why Randy's story will always be more than just another rock and roll myth. It's a painful reminder of how easily genius can be lost when responsibility fails.